If you're a returning viewer to this channel, then you already know how I operate. In most of my intros, I might say something to tie into the story. Sometimes I tell folklore. I always find myself trying to get a better perspective on things. But this case truly left me baffled. No matter what I say or do will prepare you for the ending. It's truly one that left me speechless. Just listen to the story, and you'll find out why. April 19th, 2001. The world would make way for Kaliah Deering. She would be brought into this world by her mother Veronica and her father, James Deering. From early on in life, Kaliah is described as someone with a sweet soul, someone who enjoys singing, dancing, and hanging out with friends. When Kaliah was young, the relationship between her parents wouldn't last, and they would ultimately separate, in which her mother would go on to date a man who goes by the name of David Harner. This relationship would be the beginning of a family merger, and where Kaliah would meet one of her stepsisters, who goes by the name of Natasha Harner. The world would make way for her on January 7th of 1993. Natasha is described as someone who was always smiling, a free spirit, someone who was bright, a loving girl who loved all around her. Both Kaliah and Natasha are Pennsylvania natives, and by the year of 2017, Kaliah would be 16, while Natasha would be 24, and they would be residing in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We have all heard the saying that blood is thicker than water, but although Kaliah and Natasha weren't blood relatives, they considered each other sisters, not stepsisters. By 2017, they were going through a rough patch because a year prior, they would lose the man whom brought them together. David Harner would pass away, but that would only bring them closer together. When either girl wasn't hanging out with friends or family, they were considered hardworking, determined. At only 16 years old, Kaliah would be working at McDonald's, while her older sister Natasha would maintain a steady position as shift leader at a Burger King. Around November of 2017, both would be staying with an older relative, a sister, whom they enjoyed spending time with. This was the season for families. After all, it's November, and Thanksgiving was coming up. But little did the family know that before Thanksgiving would come, their family would be hit with yet another tragedy, something that would alter everyone's lives. November 9th, 2017. The older sister of Kaliah and Natasha would be returning home from work after a period of time. But once entering the home, she would come across a crime scene. Inside of her home, she would find the bodies of her sisters, and in complete shock and in panic mode, she would contact the authorities, and they would arrive on the scene. Later, the victims would be identified as 16-year-old Kaliah Deering and 24-year-old Natasha Harner.
The night of the shooting at the 2200 block of Logan Street.
It's just unbelievable. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
A grandmother torn apart, wondering why this happened to 24-year-old Natasha Harner and 16-year-old Kaliah Deering. The coroner says they were shot multiple times, and he says whoever killed them did with intent. Police say the victims were found in their home.
They were good girls. They were doing the right thing. They were going to work every day.
The victim's uncle came back to their home the next day to say his final goodbye, and he had a message for the killer.
We're coming for you. We're going to get you. They don't deserve this. These girls were good girls.
Backline police say it's believed that the victims may have known their killer. We are told the person responsible for this is armed and dangerous. Reporting live in Harrisburg, Portia Johnson, News 8.
Word would begin to spread about the homicides, and the community outreach would be gigantic. Anyone and everyone who had ever encountered the sweet souls had nothing but good things to say about them. And when people were questioned about who may want to harm them, no one had anyone in mind. But although they didn't have a culprit, one thing was certain: the girls were loved. The beginning of the investigation would prove to be hard for the authorities. An autopsy would reveal that both girls died by gunfire. But when they were on the scene analyzing it, they didn't find a weapon, nor did they find any shell casings. They would spend the first days interviewing friends and family. But then those days would slowly begin to elapse. And before you know it, a full week had passed, and there were no answers as to what happened to the two girls. By then, a vigil had already been held for the females, and the love would outpour, and everyone at this point was screaming not only for justice for them, but for the community violence to come to a halt. People were beginning to wonder if the case would ever be solved. But on November 16th of 2017, a major breakthrough would happen in the case. 23-year-old Jeremiah Battle would be arrested for the murders of Natasha and Kaliah. Authorities didn't make clear exactly what led them to this man, but he was the person of interest at the time. He would be taken into custody and a warrant would be drawn to search his home. Whenever the police are looking to investigate a case and execute a search warrant, they're hoping for the smoking gun, the murder weapon. But upon searching his residence, they didn't find one. However, they did find evidence linking him to the crime. So, upon being arrested, he would be immediately transported to the interrogation room. And while in this room, the police were hoping for a confession. And a confession is exactly what they got. Jeremiah Battle would explain to the authorities that he was acquainted with both Kaliah and Natasha. They were in fact friends, whom he had met through mutual friends. The detectives then proceeded to ask him about what happened on the night of November 9th of 2017. He explained that on that night, he drove to the 2200 block of Logan Street, located in York, Pennsylvania. He had in fact planned to meet with the girls. However, they weren't responding. So he decided to break inside of the home. He then explained to the authorities that once inside, an argument began. He then shot 24-year-old Natasha Harner in the upper torso and in the head area, and then fired one shot at Kaliah Deering in the head area. He then explains that he picked up 2 shell casings and then fled the scene, leaving the girls' lifeless bodies behind. But I think the worst part about this entire situation is why, when asked why Jeremiah Battle committed this act, he would reply to the investigators that he was upset about his broken windshield wiper. And on that night, he was going over to confront the girls about who was going to pay for it. That's right. 2 innocent women lost their lives behind a windshield wiper. Authorities would explain that in this interview, he seemed somewhat remorseful and said that he never planned to go over there and harm them, but rather the situation got out of hand. But the investigators weren't buying the story because his story wasn't adding up. He shot both of the girls multiple times when he only explained a few shots being fired. And after all, he went over that home upset. So the authorities would decide to charge him with 2 counts of premeditated murder.
Police filed a search warrant to collect the murder weapon and other evidence from Jeremiah Battle's home and car. Police say they never found the gun, but they did get what they needed to arrest Battle in his home this morning.
We have sufficient evidence to place Mr. Battle at the crime and that he's the one who committed these horrible, tragic murders.
Police say Battle was an acquaintance of the victims. They say he broke into their home on Logan Street last week and killed 24-year-old Natasha Hartner and 16-year-old Kaliah Deering. The chief says there were a lot of sleepless nights for police to find the shooter.
Because of love solved this case.
Police say they also got good information from the community, which all was a big help in putting Battle behind bars.
Kaliah, could you tell us if she was pregnant?
I could, but
No! Please tell me no! Don't tell me it was my daughter. Please tell me it was Kaliah, please. Please tell me it was Kaliah. No! Not my baby. No! Oh, God, no! Oh, God! I thought it was a Grammy. She was pregnant. No.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late, they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Once in court, no more answers would come out, because at the beginning of his trial, 23-year-old Jeremiah Battle would plead guilty to the murder charges. And when someone shows up to court and pleads guilty, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. There's no information on how exactly the windshield wiper was broken, or exactly what turned wrong in that room that forced him to fire a weapon. After pleading guilty, he would be sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 20 years for the burglary and tampering of evidence. He is currently in prison serving this sentence. But although they did capture the culprit, some of the family members believe that sentence wasn't harsh enough, and they were seeking the ultimate penalty. Because after all, Jeremiah Battle took the lives of 2 young innocent women over a mere windshield wiper. And in the end, he gets to keep his life. But the girls are no longer here. The family is forced to mourn the loss of their loved one, knowing that the person who committed this is still breathing. But to make matters worse, and add insult to injury, we all know that prisons are funded by tax dollars, and taxpayers are paying to take care of the prisoners. So not only did they lose their loved one, but now their hard-earned tax dollars are going to pay to take care of Jeremiah Battle, the same man who took their love, their pride and joy away from them. What happened to 24-year-old Natasha Harner and 16-year-old Kaliah Deering is truly a tragedy. It's a heartbreaking story. My heart truly goes out to the family. And to have to remain on earth for your final days, knowing the reason why, is even more hurtful. Rest in peace, Kaliah and Natasha. Thank you for being a light for others.